Hoof prints on the ceiling. When I was in my early 20s, I lived in this one-bedroom apartment with my brother. He had the bedroom, and I slept in the living room. He had been living in this one bedroom for a couple of years prior with his ex-girlfriend, before a messy breakup. I moved in shortly after, while we waited for a two-bedroom to open up in the same building. The building itself was built in the 70s. Each unit had been updated several times before we got there. Before this, I knew there was something in there. I had spent a lot of time there prior. Before I moved in, we had taken videos of the cat acting silly and running around. Then, on review of the video, we saw her chasing orbs. I had taken a photo of myself in the mirrored closet doors that lined the hallway. When I looked behind me in the photo, I saw a face over my shoulder. After I moved in, it got worse. I have never had sleep paralysis before in my life. I was all of a sudden having more of them while living there. Ones of people peeking through the front door and being violently shaken. One night, I was falling asleep and I thought I heard my brother in my room call my name. But when I woke up, no one was there. I was sitting in the living room. I have a view of half of the dining room on one side of the kitchen, and on the other side, I can see the front door. The kitchen itself is behind a wall. I was on the couch, and in the living room, I saw movement going into the kitchen. Then, my eyes snapped to the front door. The figure came out from behind the wall. It was a tall mist with a black body and a white head. It came right at me. I felt a cool burst of air hit me. Then nothing. Some time had passed. No more figures or faces. But then, one day, we noticed over my head where I slept, there was a very distinctive, dark hoof print. When we tried to scrub it off the ceiling, we left a patch of where it was because we had to scrub so hard, it left a mark in the paint. We moved out to the two bedrooms in the same building, and all the occurrences stopped. Animal cry morphs into man screaming for help. I'm writing this post while the incident is still fresh in my mind. It occurred around midnight of Saturday, September 2nd, and each day that goes by, I feel more unsure about what I really heard that night. To preface, this took place in the Olympic Peninsula, along the Hood Canal. My girlfriend's parents recently bought a beautiful riverfront property in a rural area, down a private gravel road that has a few other houses here and there. Their property is heavily forested on all sides, though the neighbors' houses are vaguely visible to both the left and the right. The night was winding down after watching a movie. Everyone had gone to sleep while I lay awake playing on my phone. The windows were open, letting in the pleasant sound of the river bubbling outside. Close to midnight, I started hearing splashing in the river, which startled my dog, but was easily explainable as elk or deer crossing the river, since the area was very wild. However, after the splashing subsided, I started hearing a repeated animal cry. that sounded like sort of a bellow mixed with a scream or a yell. It's hard to remember exactly at this point in time, but it was deep, not like a cougar or fox screaming. And it was fast in cadence. Definitely odd, but still explainable as an animal. This happened for about 10 minutes or so, intermittently, with what sounded like a huffing or a snorting sound. I was alert at this point, listening and trying to calm my dog, who was unsettled by the sound as well. As I listened, it started moving closer. At first, sounding like it was across the river, but now on the right side of the house. As it moved closer, it transformed into what sounded like a human screaming, "Help!" in the most deranged, unsettling way possible. Like it was screaming help but couldn't quite form or enunciate the words correctly. It literally gives me goosebumps thinking about it right now. At this point, I woke up my girlfriend. We listened together in silence and rushed to wake up her parents when we both heard a pronounced "help" in the scream. Both dogs started going ballistic, and the screaming stopped at some point in the commotion, so her parents didn't get a good grasp of the sound. After shining flashlights out the windows, we went downstairs and made sure all the doors and windows were locked. After a sleepless night, we woke up and walked the perimeter of the property and found no sign of animals or humans. I was half expecting to see bloody human remains or something with how intense the screams were. I imagine that's what a person being axe murdered would sound like. At this point, I really regret not going outside armed to investigate, as I've spent the past 2 days constantly racking my brain, trying to figure out exactly what that was. I've looked into every animal sound out there and haven't found a single thing that actually sounds similar to what we heard that night. I'd probably think I imagined the whole thing if my girlfriend hadn't heard it as well. I'd love to hear any thoughts or similar experiences from this community. Black dog, red eyes. I was dropping papers off in Middleton 1 Road today. Just behind the airport, there's a back road to a place called the Oaklands. Approximately 4:45 a.m., as I was leaving on the country road, I saw what I can only describe as a very large jet black dog with eyes as red and as luminescent as brake lights in the middle of the night. Quote-unquote dog is maybe a stretch. My first instinct was wolf. The outline I saw was that of a muscular dog, and if I was to guess, I'd say the closest thing would be a large Malinois, German Shepherd size and build. It was jumping into a bush on the side of the road as I clocked it. This bush was extremely thick, with branches more than leaves, and would have made it difficult for anything to get through that way. Its eyes weren't reflecting my headlights, and almost seemed to give off its own light. It was bigger than a fox, and had 2 muscular arms and legs to really look like a deer, and you would assume, had it already been in the area, if it was a deer, it would have been spooked by my engine on the way up. This has obviously freaked me out, and Google is providing mixed answers, and I was wondering if anyone had any experience. For the record, 1. I was wide awake, and I'm used to being out at these times. It doesn't affect me anymore. 2. My main beams were on. I had clear visibility, and it was only maybe 2 to 3 car lengths away from me. 3, sadly, no dash cam. My younger sister was haunted and traumatized by a black cat demon. Yes, you heard that right. My sister, who we'll call Taylor, was actually being haunted by a demon who had formed itself to look like a black cat. Okay, a little backstory here. When I was 6, we moved into a house that my paternal grandparents owned. The house itself was creepy. I remember, at night, you would hear weird sounds in the kitchen. Lights would come on by themselves, knives would go missing, and then be found in a random place like the fridge. You would hear kids laughing in the basement, and in my little sister's room. Black shadows would appear at night. The list goes on and on. I had a personal encounter with this spirit that we all saw while living in that house that still gives me chills to this day. One night, I was sleeping in my room. I was 6 at the time. There was a door in my room that led down into the basement. We had an above-ground basement, and the main living area was on top. I remember being woken up to hearing the creaking of that door. Being a kid, I thought it was my mom or dad going down into the basement to check up on the laundry. To my surprise, it was neither. It was this dark figure that was looking right at me. I froze in fear. I had never been so scared in my life. As one does, I hid under the blankets, and I waited under the blankets until I fell back asleep. This was the first and last time I saw this figure. Fast forward to a couple months later. My sister was 2 going on 3. She was a little baby at the time. She would always say to us, "Do you see black cat, black cat?" She would always say this, but we had no cat or animals in that house, so we thought nothing of it and just brushed it off. Come to find out that my little sister would be tormented by whatever the hell this thing was. I know this may sound like something straight out of a movie or a Stephen King novel, but it's true. I lived this hell. And nights were the worst. Because almost every night, I would be woken up to my sister screaming and crying, yelling, "The black cat is going to get me, it's coming." Can you imagine hearing those words come out of a 2-year-old's mouth? Yeah, it's traumatizing. This went on for months. My mom was barely getting any sleep due to the fact that we're all living in this nightmare of a house. It was getting to the point that my mom looked like she hadn't slept in years. After going through this hell for months on end, my grandmother had told her friend about what was going on in that house. She decided she wanted to come see the house. Once she stepped foot into the house, she felt it. She said to my mom that whatever is here doesn't want us to be. That it was going after my sister because she was young, she was innocent. After a few days, she came back and she anointed the entire house. She went into every room but my mom's. She told my mom she couldn't go in that room. She could not go across the doorway. There was a back door in my mom's room that she had my mom open when she finished anointing the room. Once she finished, she had my mom go in the room and open the door. When she opened the door, There was this rush of cold air that you could clearly see. My mom's pant legs moved when it crossed and went out of the back door. We never saw or heard anything in that house again. Shortly after, we ended up moving. I still replay this in my head, even 16 years later. This still traumatizes me, and I hate speaking about this story, but I hope it gives some kind of closure by sharing it with others. I know this was super long, and I'm sorry for that. There were so many things that got left out because of how traumatizing it was. If you'd like to know more, don't hesitate to ask. I'm free to any questions you may have. Thank you for giving this a read.